If you keep touching me like that. The man's voice was low, controlled, almost gentle as Marin's hand lingered on his forearm while she reached past him to point out the frozen landscape through the train window. You're going to discover I'm not nearly as harmless as you seem to think I am. Marin Castell, 29 years old, professional tour guide for luxury travel experiences, chronic optimist who saw the best in everyone and had made a career out of making strangers feel comfortable in foreign places, laughed and patted his arm again like he was an anxious golden retriever, instead of a 6'2" man in an immaculately tailored charcoal suit who was watching her with the kind of focus that should have set off alarm bells. "Oh, you're adorable when you try to sound intimidating," she said brightly, completely missing the way his jaw tightened, or how the elegant black cat that had been lounging on the seat beside him raised its head and fixed her with eyes that seemed far too intelligent for a normal house cat. "Don't worry. I know you're probably not used to people being so hands-on, but I'm a hugger. It's a personality flaw. My mother says I have no concept of personal space. Here, let me just—" She reached up to straighten his already perfect tie, her fingers brushing against his throat. "There, much better. You looked a little—" His hand shot up and caught her wrist. Not hard, not painful, but absolutely immovable. "Marin." He said her name like it was a complete sentence, his ice-gray eyes holding hers with an intensity that finally made something in her survival instinct wake up and whisper that maybe this cheerful stranger she'd been treating like a nervous corporate executive for the past 3 hours was actually something else entirely. "Sit down, stop touching me, and listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. The Arctic Star, the most exclusive luxury train in the Northern Hemisphere, a moving 5-star hotel that traveled from Moscow to Vladivostok, carrying only 20 passengers at a time through some of the most remote and beautiful landscape on Earth, swayed slightly as it navigated a curve, the motion pressing her closer to him before she managed to extract her wrist from his grip and take a step back. Okay, you're right. I'm sorry." She held up both hands in apology, her cheerful tour guide smile faltering slightly. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. It's just, you seemed so nervous when you boarded, and I thought maybe if I was friendly and warm you'd relax and enjoy the journey more. That's literally my job, making people comfortable. But you're right. I should have asked first before—" 3 hours ago, he interrupted, his voice still quiet but with an edge now that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. "You played cards with me in the observation car. Yes? That was fun. You're very good at poker. I'm terrible at it. I can never keep a straight face when I'm bluffing." She was rambling now, a nervous habit that kicked in when she sensed she'd made a social mistake. "Though honestly, I was mostly just trying to pass the time until the storm cleared and we could get the full tour schedule back on track. The conductor said we might be delayed for, you bet, 7 days, he continued, as if she hadn't spoken. "When you ran out of money, you said 7 days of whatever you want, and laughed like it was a joke, like you weren't making a binding agreement with a complete stranger." The memory came back with uncomfortable clarity. She'd been down to her last chips he'd raised, and she'd gotten caught up in the moment and said something stupid and dramatic because she'd been certain her full house would win, except it hadn't. His straight flush had demolished her hand, and she'd laughed it off and said something like, "Well, I guess you own me for a week," in that joking way people do when they're embarrassed about losing badly. That was just a figure of speech. I didn't mean literally. I did. He stood now, and she realized for the first time how much he'd been deliberately making himself smaller in her presence, how he'd been careful not to loom or intimidate or use his full physical presence. Now, rising to his full height in the narrow train corridor, blocking her path back to the passenger cars, he was suddenly very different from the awkward, overdressed businessman she'd been treating like a nervous tourist. 7 days, Marin. You said whatever you want, and I'm holding you to that agreement. You can't be serious. That's insane. You can't—" She looked around wildly, hoping to see other passengers or staff, but the private car she'd followed him to, at his polite request to see his cabin, because he'd seemed so harmless, was isolated, separated from the rest of the train by 2 locked doors that she now realized she hadn't paid attention to him locking behind them. "This is kidnapping. This is you honoring a debt." He stepped closer and she backed up until she hit the wall, expensive wood paneling cold against her shoulders through her cream cashmere sweater. "I won. You lost. And now—" His hand came up and she flinched, but he just brushed a strand of honey blonde hair away from her face with surprising gentleness. "For the next 7 days, you belong to me. I don't belong to anyone. I'm a person, not a prize. And even if I did agree to something stupid while playing cards, that's not legally binding, and I have a job to do, and passengers depending on me, and your passengers have been reassigned to Ivan, the backup tour guide. I made arrangements before we left Moscow. He said it calmly, like he was discussing dinner reservations instead of what was essentially abduction. Your phone won't work. We're too remote. No cell towers for 500 miles. The train won't stop at any stations for 4 days because of the storm that's coming. The crew has been paid to respect my privacy, and the doors to this section are locked from the inside. He watched her process this, watched the exact moment the reality of her situation sank in. So, 7 days. Just you, me, and Shadow. Shadow? Her voice came out strangled. He gestured to the black cat, which had jumped down from the seat and was now weaving between his legs, purring loudly. My cat. She's an excellent judge of character. If she likes you, you're probably safe. Probably. I haven't decided yet. He moved past her, giving her space to breathe but not space to run, and settled into one of the plush armchairs, crossing one leg over the other with casual elegance. But I'm leaning toward keeping you alive. You're more entertaining than I expected. This was insane. This was a nightmare. This was... The train lurched suddenly, throwing her off balance, and he caught her automatically, pulling her down onto his lap with one arm, while his other hand steadied Shadow, who'd been about to tumble from her perch. Easy, he murmured, and she realized with a start that he was talking to her, not the cat, his arm around her waist holding her secure against his chest while the train stabilized. The tracks are getting worse. Storm's moving in faster than they predicted. Marin tried to scramble off his lap, but his arm tightened just enough to keep her in place. Not painful, not aggressive, just absolutely immovable. Let me go. No. He said it simply without heat or anger. You're going to sit here until you calm down, and we can have a rational conversation about our arrangement. There is no arrangement. You're holding me hostage. I'm holding you to your word. His breath was warm against her ear, his voice maddeningly calm while her heart was trying to beat its way out of her chest. There's a difference. You made a bet. You lost. Now you pay. That's how the world works, Marin. Actions have consequences. Not when the action is a joke during a card game. It wasn't a joke to me. Something in his tone made her stop struggling and actually look at him, really look at him for the first time since this nightmare had started. His ice-gray eyes were steady on hers. No malice there, no cruelty, just absolute certainty. I don't joke about agreements, ever. When you said 7 days of whatever I want, I took that seriously. And what I want, he paused, seemed to choose his words carefully, is your company, your attention, your time. Nothing you don't freely choose to give beyond that. You just said I belong to you for 7 days. You do. But belonging doesn't mean what you think it means. His hand moved from her waist to rest lightly on her knee, his touch warm through her tailored wool trousers. It means for 7 days, you don't run away, you don't hide, you spend time with me, you talk to me, you be honest with me. And when, you touch me. His fingers traced a slow pattern on her knee that made her breath catch for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. You understand that I'm not harmless, that I'm not cute, that I'm something very different from what you've been treating me as. What are you? The question came out as a whisper. He smiled, and it was beautiful and terrible. For now, I'm Dmitry Volkov, businessman, art collector, someone taking a very expensive train journey for reasons you don't need to know. And you, his fingers stilled on her knee. You're the woman who's going to spend the next 7 days keeping me company while we cross Siberia in a snowstorm. And after 7 days? After 7 days, the train arrives in Vladivostok. You get off. You go back to your life. You forget this happened. His eyes held hers. Unless you decide you don't want to forget. But that's 7 days away. Let's start with today. Marin stared at him, at this stranger who'd somehow trapped her in the most luxurious cage imaginable, and tried to figure out if she was more terrified or, God help her, intrigued. You're insane, she said finally. Probably. He lifted his hand from her knee and gestured to the chair across from him. But I'm insane with excellent taste in travel and a very comfortable private train car. You can either spend the next 7 days fighting me and being miserable, or you can accept that you're stuck here and make the best of it. Your choice. She stood on shaky legs, put as much distance between them as the small cabin would allow, and tried to think. The train was moving. They were in the middle of nowhere. Her phone really didn't work. She'd checked it compulsively since boarding and found nothing but no service for hours. The storm was coming. The doors were locked. She was well and truly trapped. What exactly do you want from me? She asked, keeping her voice steady with effort. For these 7 days, specifically. Your company, your conversation, your honesty. He leaned back in his chair, Shadow immediately jumping into his lap and curling up like a furry black circle. I want you to stop treating me like I'm a nervous tourist who needs hand-holding and careful management. I want you to be real with me, and He paused. I want you to understand that every time you touch me casually, like I'm harmless, like I'm safe, you're playing a very dangerous game. Why? Because I'm not used to being touched. He said it quietly, his hand moving absently through Shadow's fur. People don't touch me. They're too afraid, too aware of what I am. You've been patting my arm and fixing my tie and brushing against me like I'm normal, like I'm safe, and He stopped, seemed to struggle for words. It's intoxicating and dangerous, because the more you do it, the more I want you to keep doing it. And that want is not harmless, Marin. That want is the thing I've spent 7 hours on this train trying to control. The confession hung in the air between them, honest and raw and terrifying in its implications. I don't understand, she whispered. I know. That's part of why I'm keeping you here, so you can understand, so you can see what you're playing with. He stood, Shadow jumping gracefully to the floor, and moved to the window where snow had started falling in thick white sheets. We have 7 days, a train journey through one of the most remote places on Earth, and an agreement you made without understanding what it meant. Let's see what happens. Outside, the storm hit in full force, wind screaming past the windows, snow reducing visibility to nothing, the train slowing to a crawl as it navigated increasingly treacherous tracks. Inside, Marin looked at this stranger who claimed she belonged to him for a week, and tried to figure out if she was in danger or if this was something else entirely. Shadow meowed loudly, walked over to Marin, and wound herself around Marin's ankles with enthusiastic purring. She likes you, Dmitri observed, still looking out at the storm. That's either very good or very bad for you. I haven't decided which yet. What happens if she didn't like me? Then I'd know you were dangerous. Shadow only likes good people, and people who are too naive to recognize danger when they see it. He turned back to face her. Which are you, Marin? Good or naive? Can't I be both? That's what I'm going to find out. He gestured to the small dining table set into an alcove. For now, we eat. The dining car sent dinner before the storm hit. Beef stroganoff, blini with caviar, real Russian food, not the tourist version you've been serving your groups, and wine from my private collection. Sit. It wasn't a request. Marin sat because what else was she going to do? Jump from a moving train into a Siberian snowstorm? Throw herself at locked doors until someone heard her screaming? She was trapped, and he knew it, and they both knew she knew it. He served her with surprising grace, plating food like he'd done it 1,000 times, pouring wine with precise movements that suggested training or habit or both. Eat, he said, settling across from her. You haven't eaten since Moscow. I've been watching. That's creepy. That's observant. There's a difference. He took a sip of his wine, watching her over the rim of his glass. I notice everything about you, Marin. The way you laugh too loud to cover nervousness. The way you touch people to make them feel comfortable. The way you see the best in everyone even when you shouldn't. I've been studying you since the moment you walked onto this train with your clipboard, and your cheerful smile, and your complete inability to recognize danger. If you've been watching me, you know I'm nobody. I'm not interesting. I'm not special. I'm just a tour guide who's good at making people feel welcome. Why me? Why this? What do you actually want? He set down his glass with careful precision. I want to know if you can see past the surface. If you can look at me and see what I actually am instead of what you want me to be. Everyone sees what they want to see. The businessman, the art collector, the nervous first-time traveler. But you, he leaned forward, you see a harmless, awkward man who needs reassurance. And I want to know how long it takes before you see the truth. What truth? That I'm none of those things. That I'm not harmless. That I'm not awkward. That every moment since you sat down across from me in that observation car has been calculated and controlled and designed to make you comfortable enough to make a bet you couldn't win. His smile was sharp now, predatory. I let you think you were helping me. I let you touch me. I let you see what you wanted to see. And then I won. And now you're here. And now? He picked up his fork, took a bite of stroganoff like they were discussing the weather instead of what amounted to psychological manipulation and entrapment. Now we see if you can adapt. If you can survive 7 days with the real me instead of the version I let you believe in. Marin's hands were shaking as she reached for her wine glass. This was so much worse than she'd thought. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a weird joke that had gone too far. This was planned, calculated. He'd been playing her from the beginning. Why? Her voice was barely audible over the howl of the wind outside. Why go to all this trouble? You could have anyone. I don't want anyone. I want someone who sees me as harmless and touches me without fear. Someone who treats me like I'm normal. Someone who... He stopped, and for the first time she saw something real flicker across his face. Something that might have been loneliness, or hunger, or both. Someone who makes me feel like I'm something other than what I've become. What have you become? Eat your dinner, Marin. We have 7 days for revelations. Let's start with food and wine and getting through the first night without you having a complete breakdown. He raised his glass. To unexpected journeys, to broken agreements, and to the next 7 days of truth. She didn't toast with him, didn't touch her food, just sat there trying to process the fact that her entire reality had shifted in the space of an hour. The train lurched again, harder this time, and the lights flickered. Shadow yowled in protest, jumped onto the table and knocked over the wine bottle, sending red liquid spreading across the white tablecloth like blood. Storm's getting worse, Dmitri observed calmly, righting the bottle and moving the cat gently back to the floor. We'll probably lose power at some point. I have candles, blankets, everything we need to be comfortable while we wait it out. His eyes found hers across the table. Everything except honesty. That, you're going to have to provide yourself. You want honesty? She stood up abruptly, the chair scraping back. Fine. Here's honesty. You're holding me prisoner. This is kidnapping. This is insane. And I don't care how philosophical you want to make it sound. This is wrong. Sit down. No. He stood too, moved around the table with that controlled grace that should have warned her from the beginning that he wasn't what he seemed. Marin, sit down. Or what? You'll force me? You'll... His hand shot out and caught her wrist again, and suddenly she was pressed against the wall, his body caging hers but not touching, his free hand flat on the wood paneling beside her head. Or nothing, he said quietly, his face inches from hers. I won't force you, won't hurt you, won't touch you beyond this unless you ask me to. But you need to understand something. You're stuck on this train with me for 7 days whether you cooperate or not, whether you eat or not, whether you talk to me or not. The only variable is whether those 7 days are tolerable or miserable, and that choice is entirely yours. She could feel his breath on her face, could smell his cologne, something expensive and complex, cedar and leather and something darker underneath. Could feel the heat radiating off him despite the growing cold as the heating system struggled against the storm. Let me go, she whispered. I will, as soon as you sit back down and eat your dinner like a rational adult who understands that fighting reality is exhausting and pointless. His eyes searched hers. I'm not your enemy, Marin. I'm just someone who wants 7 days of your company. That's all. 7 days of conversation and honesty, and being treated like I'm something other than what the world sees. Is that really so terrible? Yes, when it's forced, when I don't have a choice. You had a choice. You chose to make a bet you couldn't win. He released her wrist, stepped back, gave her space. Now you're living with the consequences. Welcome to reality. It's often unpleasant. Marin slid down the wall until she was sitting on the plush carpet, her knees drawn up to her chest, trying very hard not to cry because crying would be giving him something, and she was determined not to give him anything he didn't already have. Shadow approached cautiously, sniffed her hand, then climbed into her lap and started purring like a small engine, her warmth and weight oddly comforting. She's comforting you, Dmitri observed, settling back into his chair and watching this interaction with focused attention. She does that. When I have nightmares, she sleeps on my chest. When I'm angry, she headbutts my hand until I calm down. When I'm lonely, he paused. She sits with me. She's better company than most humans. Present company possibly accepted. I'm not company. I'm a hostage. You're both. And you're trying to decide which label bothers you more. He stood again, moved to a built-in cabinet, and pulled out thick blankets and pillows that looked absurdly luxurious. The bedroom is through that door. You'll sleep there. I'll sleep out here. Door locks from the inside if it makes you feel safer, though we both know I could break it down if I wanted to, but I won't, because I meant what I said. I don't force. I don't take. He set the blankets on the couch with careful precision. I just hold people to their agreements. This isn't an agreement. This is a hostage situation. Call it what you want. We're still stuck here for 7 days. He moved to the window, looked out at the white chaos beyond. Storm's going to last at least 48 hours according to the conductor. We'll be moving slowly, stopping frequently, possibly stuck in one place for extended periods. Just us, this train car, Shadow, and the truth neither of us wants to face. What truth? He turned back to her, and in the flickering light from the struggling electrical system, he looked different, older, harder, more dangerous. That you saw exactly what you wanted to see when you looked at me, and I let you. And now you have to live with the consequences of your own willful blindness. The lights went out completely. In the darkness, Maren heard shadows purr, felt the cat's warmth in her lap, heard Dmitri moving with confident precision like he could see in the dark. A match struck. Candlelight bloomed. His face appeared in the warm glow, all sharp angles and shadows, looking like something from a Gothic painting. 7 days, Maren, he said quietly, lighting more candles until the small space was bathed in soft golden light that made everything feel simultaneously more intimate and more dangerous. 7 days to see if you can look past the surface. 7 days to understand what you've been playing with every time you touched me and smiled at me and treated me like I was harmless. 7 days to learn that the most dangerous things in the world are the ones you don't recognize as threats. He handed her a candle in a heavy crystal holder, his fingers brushing hers with that same careful gentleness that was somehow more unsettling than aggression would have been. Welcome to the Arctic Star, Maren. Welcome to 7 days of truth. Try not to break before we're done. She took the candle with shaking hands, watched him settle onto the couch with Shadow immediately curling up against his side, and realized with growing horror that part of her, a very small, very stupid part, wanted to know what would happen if she stayed. Day 1. Night. The first night was endless. Maren locked herself in the bedroom as promised, but sleep was impossible. Every creak of the train, every howl of wind, every sound from the main cabin made her jump. She kept expecting him to try the door, to break his promise, to become the monster she'd convinced herself he must be. He didn't. Around 2 a.m., she heard him moving around, heard water running, heard his voice speaking softly. To Shadow, she realized, not to anyone else. The words were in Russian, too quiet and fast for her limited knowledge of the language to follow, but the tone was gentle, almost tender. A man who spoke softly to his cat in the middle of the night was hard to categorize as purely dangerous, which was probably exactly what he wanted her to think. She must have dozed eventually, because she woke to weak gray light filtering through frosted windows and the smell of coffee and something sweet, pastries maybe, or fresh bread, and underneath it, the rich aroma of real food being prepared, not just reheated. She sat up carefully, muscles stiff from tension and poor sleep, and found a note slid under her door, written in that same precise handwriting she'd seen on documents he'd been reading yesterday. Coffee and breakfast in the main cabin. Doors unlocked. I'm not going to drag you out, but you should eat. Storm's still going strong. We're not moving. Day 1 of 7. The clock starts now. She used the private bathroom, because apparently this train car had its own bathroom with actual marble fixtures and heated floors, because why wouldn't a man who trapped tour guides have a bathroom nicer than her entire apartment, and studied her reflection in the mirror. She looked exactly like someone who'd spent the night having an existential crisis. Hair tangled from restless half-sleep, eyes red-rimmed, still wearing yesterday's cream sweater and wool trousers because she didn't have anything else, and her luggage was... where? Had he actually taken it, or was that another lie designed to keep her off balance? Professional tour guide Maren, the woman who prided herself on always being put together and cheerful and ready to handle any situation, looked like she'd been through a natural disaster. Perfect. She braided her hair simply to get it under control, splashed cold water on her face, and gave herself a stern look in the mirror. You've handled difficult clients before. You've managed emergencies. You've stayed calm when tours went completely wrong. This is just, she paused, just a very unusual situation with a very unusual person. You can do this. 7 days. You can survive 7 days of anything. The pep talk didn't help as much as she'd hoped. She opened the bedroom door expecting, what? To find him waiting? Watching? Ready to pounce with more uncomfortable truths? Instead, she found him at the small table, reading a leather-bound book that looked old and valuable, shadow stretched across his lap like a furry black scarf. 2 cups of coffee steamed beside a plate of pastries that looked professionally made, and the main cabin was warm despite the storm raging outside. He looked up when she entered, marked his page with a silk ribbon bookmark, and gestured to the chair across from him with a small smile that seemed almost genuine. Coffee's still hot. Milk and sugar on the tray if you want them. Pastries are fresh. The dining car has a baker who starts work at 4 a.m. apparently. We're running on generators now, so hot food while we have it. He said it all in that same controlled tone, like this was a normal morning conversation between normal people. Did you sleep? No. Neither did I. He took a sip of his coffee. Shadow snores. She sounds like a diesel engine. It's one of her few flaws, that and her complete inability to understand that my lap is not always available as a bed. Despite everything, despite the fear and anger and confusion, Maren felt her lips twitch toward something that might have been a smile. She sat because standing felt like giving him power, poured coffee with hands that only shook slightly, added milk and sugar while trying to ignore the way he watched her every movement with that unsettling focus. Day 1, he continued, setting down his cup with a soft clink against the saucer. Let's establish some ground rules for our arrangement. You don't try to escape, not that you could, but let's avoid the drama and wasted energy. I don't touch you without explicit permission. We eat meals together. We talk honestly when we talk. And every time you want to touch me, his eyes found hers. You ask first, and I'll tell you whether it's safe or not. Safe. Safe for you. Safe for me. Safe for both of us. He leaned back, and she noticed for the first time that he looked tired too. Shadows under his eyes suggesting his claim about not sleeping was absolutely true. You've spent your entire adult life touching people casually. It's how you connect, how you comfort, how you show you care. It's part of what makes you exceptional at your job. But you don't think about what it does to the person being touched. What it means when someone who's not used to casual affection suddenly gets it and wants more of it and has to control that want. Is that what this is about? You want me to touch you? I want you to understand that touching is not neutral. That every time you've put your hand on my arm or adjusted my tie or leaned against me to point out the window, you've been affecting me, affecting my control, affecting my carefully maintained distance from normal human interaction. And I want you to do it consciously, with awareness, with understanding of what it means and what it could lead to. Marin stared at him, trying to process this. You engineered this entire situation, trapped me on a train, manipulated me into a bet I couldn't win, locked me in your private car for a week, because you want me to be more thoughtful about personal boundaries. I engineered this situation because you made a promise and I'm holding you to it. The personal boundaries lesson is just one aspect of what I want from these 7 days. He selected a pastry, some kind of filled roll dusted with powdered sugar, and bit into it with controlled precision. Eat. You're going to need your energy. We're stuck here for at least another day while they clear the tracks ahead. Just you, me, Shadow, and whatever truths we can manage to tell each other. She should have refused. Should have maintained her resistance. Should have done literally anything other than reaching for a pastry because accepting his food felt like accepting the situation. But the pastries smelled amazing, and she really hadn't eaten since Moscow. And Shadow had abandoned Dimitri's lap to curl up on her feet like a warm, purring footrest, which somehow made everything feel slightly less threatening. The pastry was incredible, flaky, buttery, filled with something that tasted like apples and cinnamon and possibly heaven. She ate it without speaking, watching him watch her, trying to figure out what game they were really playing. Better? He asked when she'd finished. Food doesn't make kidnapping acceptable. No, but it makes it more comfortable, which is all I'm offering. Comfort within an uncomfortable situation. He poured more coffee for both of them. Ask me a question. A real one. Not the performative outrage about legality or morality. Something you actually want to know. She should ask about escape routes. About when the train would move again. About his plans for the remaining 6 days. Instead, she heard herself say, "Why a cat? Why not a dog, or no pet at all?" He looked genuinely surprised by the question, which gave her a small satisfaction. Shadow found me, 3 years ago. I was in St. Petersburg on business. The pause suggested business meant something probably illegal. And she was in an alley, tiny black kitten, half frozen, probably going to die. And he stopped, seemed to struggle with the admission. I picked her up, took her to a vet, paid for treatment, planned to leave her there or find her a home. But he looked down at the cat, who'd returned to his lap and was making biscuits on his thigh. She looked at me like I was the only good thing in her world, and I couldn't leave something that trusted me that completely. It was the most honest thing he'd said since this nightmare began, and it made him human in a way that was almost harder to handle than the dangerous stranger version. Your turn, Marin said, focusing on her coffee to avoid his eyes. If you want honesty, show me how it works. Ask me something true and I'll answer, and we'll see if this works both ways. Fair. He considered her with that unsettling focus. Why did you become a tour guide? And don't give me the professional answer about loving travel and helping people. I want the real reason. She took a breath, surprised by how much the question cut to something she usually avoided thinking about. Because I'm good at temporary, she said finally, the words coming slower than usual, less polished. I'm good at making strangers comfortable for a limited time. Good at being exactly what people need for a tour or a trip or an experience. But I'm terrible at permanent, at relationships that last beyond the duration of a journey, at being needed for more than a scheduled period. She looked up at him. Tour guiding lets me be important to people without the pressure of being important forever. It's safer than trying to be someone's permanent person and failing at it. You're lonely, he said quietly, and it wasn't a question. You surround yourself with temporary connections because you don't believe you can maintain a permanent one. You're afraid of being abandoned, so you build relationships with built-in expiration dates. The accuracy of that assessment hit like a physical blow, stealing her breath for a moment. How did you? Because I do the same thing. Different method, same result. I surround myself with people who fear me, who want things from me, who interact with me because of what I can do for them or to them, never because of who I actually am. He set down his coffee cup. Shadow is the only living creature in my life who stays because she wants to, not because she's paid or threatened or obligated. And you, his eyes held hers. You're the first person in years who looked at me and didn't see the danger first, who touched me like I was normal, who made me feel like I could be something other than what I've spent 27 years becoming. What have you spent 27 years becoming? He stood, moved to the window where the storm continued its assault, snow piling against the glass in thick drifts. Something I don't particularly like, something necessary but not good, something that required sacrificing the parts of myself that could have normal relationships or normal interactions or normal anything. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting today. We have 6 more days for the rest. He turned back to her. But I'll give you this much truth, Marin. I'm Dmitry Volkov. Not Dmitry Volkov, the businessman or art collector or nervous traveler. Dmitry Volkov, who runs things that shouldn't exist, who makes decisions people die from, who's been building power and control since he was 16 years old and watched his father murdered in front of him, who took over that same organization and turned it into something more profitable and more dangerous and more necessary than it ever was before. His voice was matter of fact, no pride or shame, just statement. I'm the head of the Volkov Bratva. I move weapons and information and anything else people are willing to pay for. I own politicians and police and judges. I've killed 17 people personally. More if you count the ones I ordered killed but didn't pull the trigger myself. And every single one of them deserved it for reasons you'd probably agree with if I explained them. But that doesn't make me less of a killer, less of a criminal, less of exactly what you should be afraid of. The silence after this confession was profound, broken only by the wind and shadows purring and Marin's own heartbeat thundering in her ears. Why are you telling me this? She whispered. Because you asked for honesty. Because we have 7 days and I'm tired of performing. Because you're going to figure it out eventually, and I'd rather control when and how you learn it. He moved back to the table, sat down across from her like he hadn't just confessed to being exactly the kind of dangerous she should be running from. And because I want you to make a choice, knowing what I am, knowing what this situation really is. You can spend the next 6 days fighting me, hating me, being terrified of me, or... He paused. You can accept that we're stuck here together, that I'm not going to hurt you. And we can figure out what happens when someone like you spends time with someone like me, without all the usual barriers and performances and fear. That's not a choice. That's Stockholm Syndrome. Maybe. We'll find out in 6 days. He picked up his book again, found his place. For now, finish your breakfast. Then we're going to play chess. You said you're terrible at poker. Let's see if you're better at strategy. I don't want to play chess with you. Tough. We have all day. Storm's not clearing. Train's not moving. And I'm not letting you hide in the bedroom for 6 days. So, chess. Or we can talk more. Your choice. Marin looked at him, this man who'd just casually admitted to being a criminal and a killer, who kept a purring cat on his lap and read old books and had somehow made her feel simultaneously more threatened and more seen than anyone in her entire life. Why me? She asked again, needing to understand. Why specifically me? You could have done this with anyone. Why a tour guide who means nothing, who has no connections, who won't be missed by anyone important? His expression shifted then, became something more intense, more honest, more painful. Because 3 months ago I was on a different train, the Trans-Siberian Express, and I saw you with a tour group. One of your clients was having a panic attack, woman in her 60s, claustrophobic, terrified of tunnels. And you, he set down his book completely now, giving her his full attention. You held her hand for 4 hours, through every single tunnel, talking to her, distracting her, making her laugh even while she was crying. Your entire hand was cramped by the end, but you didn't let go. You didn't check your watch. You didn't get impatient. You just stayed for as long as she needed you. I was doing my job. No, you were being who you are, and He stopped, seemed to struggle with the words. I wanted someone to hold my hand through the tunnels. Someone who'd stay even when it was uncomfortable or inconvenient or hard. Someone who'd see me panicking and not run away. And I thought maybe if I could get 7 days of that, if I could experience what it's like to be on the receiving end of your specific kind of care, maybe I could figure out if I'm capable of being someone who deserves it. The honesty of it was devastating. More dangerous than the confession about killing. More threatening than the admission of criminality. Because this was real. This was vulnerable. This was everything she'd been trained to respond to in her work. Someone reaching out, someone admitting need, someone asking for exactly what she was good at providing. That's not fair, she said, her voice breaking slightly. You can't tell me you're a killer and a criminal and then tell me you need someone to hold your hand through tunnels. You can't make yourself into both the monster and the victim. You can't. I'm both, he interrupted quietly. We're all both. Every single person is simultaneously the villain in someone's story and the hero in their own. I'm not asking you to absolve me or save me or even like me. I'm just asking for 7 days where someone sees all of it. The danger and the loneliness and the carefully controlled terror of being exactly what the world made me, and doesn't run away. Shadow chose that moment to jump from Dimitri's lap to Marin's, settling with determined purring, like even the cat was trying to push her toward a decision. Marin looked down at the black cat, then up at the dangerous man who'd just laid himself more bare than any confession of crimes could accomplish. Chess, she said finally, because she didn't know what else to say. You said we're playing chess. Fine, but I'm white, and I go first. And if I win, she paused. If I win, you answer one question, completely honestly, no deflection. And if I win, same deal, one honest answer, no performance. He stood, moved to a cabinet she hadn't noticed, and pulled out an exquisite chess set. Marble and obsidian, pieces that looked like art. Of course he had a chess set that probably cost more than her annual salary. Deal, he said, setting up the board between them. Let's see what happens when we stop pretending and start being honest. Your move, Marin. She moved her pawn. The game, and the real journey, began. Day 2. The chess game lasted 3 hours. Marin lost. Not because she was bad at chess, she was actually decent. Better than she'd expected to be against someone who clearly played regularly. But Dimitri was exceptional, moving pieces with the kind of strategic thinking that came from years of calculating outcomes and predicting opponents. Your question, she said when he finally checkmated her king, sitting back in her chair with a mixture of frustration and grudging respect. You won. Ask. He studied her for a long moment, his fingers absently stroking Shadow's head while the cat purred in his lap. The storm had finally begun to clear. Weak sunlight filtering through the windows, though the train remained motionless. Why are you afraid of being needed permanently? He asked quietly. What happened that made you believe you're only valuable in temporary doses? She hadn't expected that. Had expected something about her past, her family, her work, not a question that cut straight to the core of who she was. That's not fair, she whispered. That's therapy-level questioning. That's not a chess bet question. You said one honest answer. I'm asking for it. His eyes held hers. What happened, Marin? She looked away, out at the white landscape that was slowly emerging as the storm cleared, and felt the old wound open. I was engaged, she said finally, the words coming slowly like they were being pulled from somewhere deep. 4 years ago, to someone I thought was it, the permanent person. We'd been together since college. 5 years. He proposed on graduation day. It was perfect. He was perfect. And then, she stopped. Had to swallow around the tightness in her throat. And then 3 months before the wedding, I found out he'd been cheating on me for 2 years with multiple women because I was, quote, too much, too enthusiastic, too affectionate, she laughed without humor, too everything. He said being with me was exhausting, that I needed too much attention and gave too much attention and he needed space to breathe. He was an idiot, Dimitri said quietly. Maybe, but he wasn't wrong. I am too much. I do need, she gestured vaguely. I need connection, physical affection, reassurance. All the things that are fine in small doses for tour groups, but unbearable long-term for someone who has to live with it every day. So you decided you were the problem instead of recognizing that he was fundamentally incompatible with who you are. I decided I was safer being temporary, being the enthusiastic tour guide for a week instead of the exhausting girlfriend forever. She looked back at him. Satisfied? That's my damage. That's why I touch people casually and then leave before they can get tired of me. Dimitri was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he stood, moved around the table, and held out his hand. Come here. Why? Because I'm going to show you something, and you're going to understand why I chose you, why it had to be you specifically. His hand remained extended, steady. Trust me for 30 seconds. That's all I'm asking. She shouldn't. Should maintain distance. Should protect herself. But she took his hand anyway. He pulled her up gently. Then, before she could process what was happening, wrapped his arms around her in a hug. Not sexual, not threatening, just holding her. His chin resting on top of her head, his arms secure around her back, his warmth surrounding her completely. What are you? Shh. 30 seconds. Just be here. Let me hold you. Don't perform. Don't manage. Don't do anything except exist. So she did. She stopped fighting, stopped thinking, and just existed in his arms, feeling his heartbeat against her cheek, feeling his breath in her hair, feeling held in a way she hadn't been held since before everything broke. When he finally released her, stepping back, his eyes were intense. That, he said quietly, is what I want. What I've wanted since I watched you hold that woman's hand through the tunnels. Not sex, not possession, not performance. Just human contact, connection without agenda, touch without transaction. And you, he cupped her face gently. You give that naturally. You give it to strangers. You give it freely. And I wanted to know what it felt like to be on the receiving end of that generosity, to be held by someone who sees touching as natural instead of dangerous. I don't understand, she whispered. I know. That's why we have 5 more days. He released her face, stepped back. But now you know. This isn't about trapping you. It's about learning how to be human again, how to accept affection without suspicion, how to touch and be touched without it meaning violence or manipulation or transaction. Maren stared at him, this dangerous man who'd just given her the most honest confession she'd ever heard, and felt something shift inside her chest. You're not what I thought you were, she said finally. No, I'm worse, and better, and more complicated. He moved to the window. Day 2 is starting. 5 more days to go. And now you understand what we're really doing here. What are we doing? Teaching each other how to be honest, how to touch without fear, how to exist together without performing, he looked back at her, how to be less lonely, even if it's only for a week. The train shuddered, began moving again slowly, fighting through the cleared tracks. We're moving, Maren observed. Yes, but we're still 3 days from Vladivostok, still isolated, still, he smiled slightly, still stuck with each other. Get your luggage. I had it brought from storage. You, what? Your bag is in the bedroom closet. You've been wearing the same clothes for 2 days. You earned clean clothes by making it through day 1 without running. His expression softened. And there's something else in there, a gift. You don't have to wear it, but I'd like to see you in it. She found her suitcase exactly where he said, and inside, carefully folded on top of her own clothes, was a dress. Beautiful, expensive, deep emerald green silk that looked like it cost more than 3 months of her rent. There was a note pinned to it. You smiled when you thought I wasn't watching. I want to see you smile when you know I am. D. She should have been angry about the presumption, about him buying her clothes, about all of it. Instead, she found herself holding the dress against her body, looking in the mirror, and smiling. Damn him. She showered, the first proper shower in 2 days, and changed into clean jeans and a soft gray sweater from her own bag. The dress she left on the bed, not ready to make that choice yet. When she emerged, she found breakfast waiting again. Eggs, toast, fresh fruit that must have cost a fortune this far from anywhere, and Dmitri reading a different book, Shadow in her customary position across his lap. Better? He asked, looking up. Much. She sat, served herself, tried to find some equilibrium. Thank you for the luggage, and the dress. Even if it was presumptuous and manipulative. It was both, but you smiled, so I'm not apologizing. He set down his book. Truth Game, new version. I say something true. You say if you believe me or think I'm lying. If you're wrong, you have to tell me a truth. If you're right, I tell you one. Back and forth until one of us can't continue. That sounds dangerous. Everything about this is dangerous. That's what makes it interesting. His eyes held hers. Truth 1. I've thought about kissing you approximately 47 times since yesterday morning. Her breath caught. What? Do you believe me or do you think I'm lying? She studied his face, the controlled expression, the intensity in his eyes, the slight tension in his jaw. I believe you, she whispered. Correct, which means I owe you a truth. He leaned back. I'm terrified that at the end of 7 days, you're going to walk off this train and forget I exist. That these days won't mean anything, that I'm just another temporary stop on your journey. And that thought, he paused, that thought makes me want to do something drastic to make sure you remember me, which scares me more than any physical danger I've ever faced. The honesty of it was devastating. My turn, she said, her voice shaky. Truth, I haven't thought about leaving since yesterday. I've thought about what happens after day 7, about whether, she stopped, about whether this could be more than temporary, and that terrifies me. Do I believe you? He studied her face. Yes, I believe you, which means you owe me a truth. I'm scared, she admitted. I'm scared that I'm falling for someone I can't have permanently, that these 7 days are just another way to prove that I'm only valuable in temporary doses, that when real life returns, you'll realize I'm too much, too exhausting, too... Stop. He stood, moved around the table, cupped her face in both hands. Truth, you're not too much. You're exactly enough, and anyone who made you feel otherwise was protecting themselves from having to rise to meet your capacity for love. Your ex was a coward. I'm not. How do you know? 7 days isn't. 7 days is long enough to know if someone's presence makes you want more days or fewer days. And Marin, his thumb traced her cheekbone. I want more days. Many more days. And that terrifies me because I don't get to want things like that in my world. I want to kiss you, she whispered. That's my truth. I want to kiss you, and I don't know if that's smart or stupid or just me being who I am. But I want it anyway. Then do it, he said quietly. Choose it, consciously, and then we'll both know if it's real. She did. She rose on her toes, wrapped her arms around his neck, and kissed him. It was gentle at first, questioning, his lips soft against hers, and then deeper, hungrier, his arms coming around her waist and lifting her slightly, her hands sliding into his hair, both of them pouring days of tension and truth and terrible honesty into one perfect kiss. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead against hers. Real, he said definitely. That was real. Not Stockholm, not loneliness. Real. How do you know? Because I've had plenty of both, and that was something else entirely. He set her back on her feet carefully. Day 2. And now we know, this isn't just about learning to be human. This is about learning to be human together. Day 3. They spent day 3 just existing together, reading in comfortable silence, playing chess. She won this time, barely, and asked him about his mother. He talked for 2 hours, honest and raw and beautiful, talking about everything and nothing, Shadow moving between them like a furry mediator, purring approval when they sat close, headbutting them when they drifted too far apart. The train moved steadily now, landscape blurring past, still remote but less threatening somehow with clear skies. Wear the dress tonight, Dmitri said as afternoon faded toward evening. Please, He stopped. I want to have dinner with you. Real dinner. Like we're normal people on a normal date instead of whatever this actually is. This is kidnapping, she said, but without heat. This is a week-long date that started with questionable consent issues, he corrected with a slight smile. But it's evolved, hasn't it? It had. God help her, it had. She wore the dress. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. He'd probably had someone take her measurements while she slept, or something equally invasive and somehow romantic. The green silk made her eyes luminous, her hair golden, her whole self. More. When she emerged from the bedroom, his expression made the presumption worth it. You're beautiful, he said simply. No performance, no manipulation, just truth. You're not bad yourself, she replied, taking in his dark suit, the way he'd styled his hair differently, the candles he'd lit throughout the cabin creating warm, intimate light. Dinner was elaborate. Someone from the dining car had clearly been well paid to create something special. Multiple courses, wine that probably cost more than her monthly rent. And through it all, they talked, really talked, about his childhood, difficult, violent, lonely, about hers, warm, chaotic, full of love but also expectations she couldn't meet, about Shadow, rescued, loyal, judgmental, about the future, uncertain, terrifying, possibly together. Dance with me, he said when dinner was done, when the train swayed gently beneath them, when the candlelight made everything feel like a dream. There's no music. There's always music if you listen. He stood, held out his hand. Dance with me, Marin. Let me hold you. He paused. Let me have this, before reality returns. So she danced with him. Slowly, the train's rhythm their only music, his arms around her waist, her head on his shoulder, both of them swaying in the candlelight while Shadow watched with knowing golden eyes. I don't want this to end, she whispered against his chest. I know. Neither do I. His arms tightened. 4 more days. Let's not waste them worrying about day 8. Need for day 4 was comfortable in a way that should have been impossible given how they'd started. Marin woke to find Dmitri already up, making breakfast himself instead of having it delivered. Eggs that were only slightly burned, toast that was mostly edible, coffee that was perfect because he'd been paying attention to exactly how she liked it. You cooked, she said, surprised. I'm trying to show you I can be domestically acceptable. For when... He stopped. For potential future reference. Are you asking me to move in with you? I'm asking if you'd consider not disappearing after day 7. If you'd... He set down the spatula. If you'd give this a chance. Real chance. With actual dates and conversations and seeing if what we built in artificial circumstances can survive real life. Her heart did something complicated in her chest. Ask me on day 7, she said finally. Ask me when we're getting off this train and reality is waiting. And I'll give you an honest answer. Deal. They spent the day reading together on the couch, her feet in his lap, shadows stretched across both of them, the train carrying them steadily closer to the end. At some point she dozed off and woke to find him watching her with an expression so tender it hurt. What? She asked sleepily. Nothing. Just memorizing this. In case you say no on day 7. I won't say no. You don't know that. I do. She sat up, cupped his face. I know that whatever this is, it's real. That you're not too dangerous and I'm not too much. That we... She paused. That we fit. Even though we shouldn't. Even though it's insane. We fit. He kissed her then. Slow and deep and full of promise. Day 5. Day 5 brought complications. The train was scheduled to stop briefly at a station. Just long enough for supplies, not long enough for passengers to disembark, but long enough for Marin to see other people, to remember that the outside world existed. I'm not going to stop you, Dmitri said that morning, his voice careful. If you want to leave, to get off at the station, to walk away from this, I won't stop you. The bed is void. You're free. Why? Because it has to be your choice now. Not obligation. Not because I trapped you. If you stay for days 6 and 7, I need to know it's because you want to. Not because you feel you have to. Marin looked at him. This man who'd kidnapped her and then slowly, carefully, shown her who he actually was underneath all the danger and control. I'll stay, she said. Not because of the bet. Because I want to. His relief was visible, physical, beautiful. When the train stopped, she stood at the window and watched people on the platform. Normal people doing normal things, and felt no desire to join them. Day 5, she said when the train started moving again. 2 more days, and then we figure out if this can survive reality. It will, he said with certainty. We will. Day 6 was lazy, intimate, perfect. They stayed in bed late, just sleeping mostly, wrapped around each other while Shadow claimed the best pillow. Made breakfast together, better this time, he was learning. Read, talked, kissed. Existed in the kind of domestic bliss that neither of them had thought they'd ever have. Tell me about your life, Marin said that evening. Your real life. What happens when you're not on trains kidnapping tour guides? So he did, honestly. The violence he managed, the people he employed, the constant vigilance required to stay alive in his world. And she listened without judgment, without fear, just listening. Could I be part of that world? She asked finally. If I wanted to. If we try this after day 7, I'd keep you separate from the worst of it. But yes, if you wanted. If you could handle knowing what I do without being directly involved. His eyes searched hers. Could you? I don't know, she admitted, but I want to try. She took his hand. I want to see if we can build something real, even with all the complications, even with everything. Day 7 tomorrow, he said quietly. Last day. And then we find out. Day 7. The last day arrived with bittersweet clarity. Vladivostok would be visible by evening. The train would arrive. Reality would resume. And they'd have to decide if what they'd built could survive outside their isolated bubble. I'm terrified, Marin admitted over breakfast. So am I. Dmitri reached across the table, took her hand. But I meant what I said. I want more days. Many more days. Every day, if you'll give them to me. Even though I'm too much. Even though I'll need affection and reassurance and, especially because of that, Marin, he came around the table, pulled her to her feet. You're not too much. You're what I need. What I've always needed. Someone who touches freely, who loves openly, who sees danger and chooses connection anyway. And she wrapped her arms around him. You're not too dangerous. You're exactly the right amount of dangerous. Dangerous enough to be interesting, but not so dangerous that I can't trust you. Not with me. The train began to slow. Vladivostok appearing in the distance. Last chance to run, Dmitri said quietly. I'm not running. I'm staying. Not for 7 days. She looked up at him. For however many days you'll have me. Forever then. He kissed her, deep and sure. I'll take forever. When the train finally stopped, when the doors opened, when other passengers began disembarking, they stayed. Just a few more minutes in their bubble. Just a few more minutes where it was only them and Shadow and the certainty of what they'd found. Ready? Dmitri asked finally. Ready, Marin confirmed. They walked off the Arctic Star together. Shadow in a carrier, their hands linked, stepping into whatever came next. Into reality. Into complications. Into a life built on 7 days of forced honesty and discovered truth. Into forever, if they were lucky. And as Marin looked back at the train that had trapped her and then freed her, she smiled. Thank you, she told Dmitri, for kidnapping you, for seeing me, for holding my hand through the tunnels, she squeezed his hand, for teaching me that maybe I'm not too much. Maybe I just needed someone brave enough to handle all of me. You're welcome. He kissed her forehead. And thank you, for not running, for staying, for being exactly who you are even when it was terrifying. They walked into Vladivostok together, two lonely people who'd found each other in the most unlikely way, who'd built something real in 7 days of isolation, who were about to find out if it could last a lifetime. Shadow meowed from her carrier, clearly judging them both for their dramatic tendencies. They laughed, and began day 8 of Forever. The end. So would you have stayed all 7 days with a man who trapped you on a train but turned out to be exactly what you needed? Drop a, if you would have stayed, if you would have run at the station, and if you think Shadow was the real matchmaker here. And the real question. Team 7. Days can change everything. Or team, this is completely insane. Because honestly, this story proves that sometimes the most dangerous thing is discovering you don't want to be saved. What did you think of Dmitri's confession? Was he manipulative or honest? And more importantly, could you handle dating someone from that world? Drop your thoughts because I'm reading every comment and some of you have opinions. If you love this journey from kidnapping to consent to actual love, smash that like button. Subscribe to Sophia's Letters for more stories about dangerous men, brave women, and the complicated, beautiful space between threat and tenderness. Hit that bell so you don't miss the next story because they just keep getting more intense. What do you want next? Grumpy billionaire ex-sunshine artist, bodyguard forbidden romance, enemies to lovers in the wilderness? Drop your requests. I'm listening and your ideas inspire me. Thanks for taking this 7-day journey with me. Remember, sometimes the best love stories start with the worst decisions. And if a mysterious stranger ever offers you a bet on a luxury train, maybe think twice, or don't. Your call. Black Pawn.